International. We're live on ESPN about 25 miles outside the Chicago city limits, where the weather today has just gotten better and better as the minutes have ticked away. The temperature is 76 degrees. It's sunny, a slight wind out of the northwest, but the turf is still yielding from the overnight rains. Hi, everybody. I'm Dave Johnson, and welcome to the biggest day in Illinois. The centerpiece of the festival is the big one, the Arlington Million. Let's check the conditions. The Arlington Million has a $1 million purse. This is number 17, and it's a Grade 1 event, a mile and a quarter on the grass for 3-year-olds and up. And joining me now is Charles C. Canty. And Charles, just like the weather today, in its 17th running, it just keeps getting better and better. It's
a good one. The horses in this field collectively have earned over $12 million. I think we got more millionaires here than we do upstairs in the Turf Club. They've come from all over the country, from Canada, and we've even got 2 European invaders.
But the big question, at least locally, is whether Awad can be the only other horse other than John Henry to win the Arlington Million twice.
Well, we know he's got a real affinity for Arlington Park. He won the Secretariat here as a 3-year-old. He came back 2 years later as a 5-year-old. He got a hot early pace, which really set it up for his come-from-behind style, and he came storming under Eddie Maple to set a track record which still stands today.
Now, another horse who really likes the grass surface here at Arlington is a horse by the name of Marlin. And watch him in action just 2 outs ago in the Sunset Handicap at Hollywood Park, just breezing along. He's a horse with a lot of early speed, and Gary Stevens was aboard that day, as he is going to be today.
Well, he could help set it up for another late closer. That's Op Smile, the gray horse, storming from last again, and he will be running the same sort of race today. This is the Manhattan, and he will be doing the same style under Robbie Davis, who won this race last year with Mecke.
Now, the major players, of course, you've seen some of them out there on the turf course, but there's a lot of major conditioners in the barn area here.
The trainers of these Arlington Million starters have accounted for 20 Breeders' Cup races, and we might point out that Sandpit is the only horse not nominated to the Breeders' Cup in this
Arlington
field.
Million starters have won 5 Breeders' Cup grass events in the same season. But if you compare the list of names, they're almost totally different. In fact, many of them actually have had a total role reversal between Arlington Million Day and Breeders' Cup Day. A typical example of that reversal occurred in 1988 as Mill Native produced the biggest upset in Million history, returning $83.20. Behind him, Sunshine Forever in 3rd. Great Communicator could do no better than 8th. 2 months later, it was Great Communicator's turn for the upset at 12-1 in the Breeders' Cup Turf. Sunshine Forever 2nd, while Mill Native opted for the mile and finished 9th. And 2 years ago, stretch running Awad won the Million, while Northern Spur finished far back in 10th.
It's wide open in the Arlington Million. The bid has made the lead, and now Awad. Awad explodes under the seed. Awad is drawing away. Awad is going to win the Arlington Million.
But for Awad's connections, this scene would not be repeated in New York come October. On Belmont's soggy turf course, Awad never got on track, while Chris McCarron guided Northern Spur to a hard-fought victory in the 1.5-mile turf. And here's the only successful Arlington Million Breeders' Cup double. In 1989, trainer Wayne Lucas shortened Steinlen up to a mile and produced this stirring victory.
Steinlen's in tight. He's looking for racing room toward the inside. Spona's coming hard. Zilzal unleashing a furious one on the outside. Steinlen, a daring move on the hedge, gets the lead. Sabona, one last lunge. Steinlen gets it in the final strides.
It should also be noted that finishing 2nd in the Million bodes well for Breeders' Cup starters. 3 times a runner-up at Arlington has also been 2nd in racing's biggest day. The most recent example is Sky Classic, who took a tough beat in both races, but was still named champion male turf horse for 1992. You know, I'm trying to think of my favorite Arlington Million, and so many jump out. But I know that Michael Rona, who's the track announcer here, has some ideas, and it has to start with 1981, which was the very first Arlington Million, and how could you forget it? With John Henry and the Bart. down to the wire. Was it John Henry? Was it the Bart? The Bart on the inside. John Henry on the outside. John Henry gets there by a nostril. The tightest of photo finishes, not like the dead heat we saw earlier. John Henry really won that. Now let's get Michael Rona's opinion of that.
Well, in its relatively short history, the Arlington Million certainly has developed some great heroes and a rich tradition. I can remember when the first Million was run, getting up in the middle of the night in Australia before I'd ever called a race over a public address system. I was still an aspiring commentator at that point, and I watched with great awe the spectacle of John Henry and the Bart coming to the line locked together. Since I'd been working at Arlington International the last 2 years, I must have seen that race replayed a couple of 100 times without any exaggeration, and I can assure you that John Henry still hasn't won as far as I'm concerned, and I will be particularly cautious if it's a tight finish on the turf course in the Million
and the
today.
morning line. We start with Labib, who was bred in Great Britain and starts at 12-1, and Corey Black is the rider. Op Smile, and Robbie Davis rides the long shot at 20, but Robbie won here with Mecke last year. Awad with Pat Day, 3-1 in the morning line, and of course Pat charging to win number 7,000 in his great career. Sandpit 5-2 with Chris McCarron at 126 pounds. McCarron looking for a big weekend. He won the Travers, of course, yesterday with Deputy Commander. Marlin with Gary Stevens starts at 5-1. Allied Forces with Manfranco de Torre at 8-1, and if you saw what Allied Forces did in Europe at the Royal Ascot meet, that 8-1 might look a little bit high. The 7-horse has been scratched. That's Chief Bearheart. Percutant with Mick Cannan is at 12, and Jerry on the outside with Jerry Bailey, who just had a winner, is at 6-1. Now let's go to Bob Newmeyer.
With a guy who loves to see the ESPN cameras at the racetrack, Chris McCarron, because he won the Haskell with Touch Gold. He won the Travers yesterday with Deputy Commander, and today he'll ride Sandpit in the Arlington Million for the first time. But Chris, first things first. He had a chance to ride the brilliant John Henry here in 1984. It was his third run in the Million, only one of 4 horses to run 3 times. Today, Awad and Sandpit will join that foursome. 3 runs in the Arlington Million. Reminisce with me about John Henry in 1984.
Yeah, that's a wonderful feat in itself. It's great testimony to the horsemen that are preparing these horses, and obviously Mandela's done a great job with Sandpit. It'll be the first time that I'm climbing aboard Sandpit's back, but this year in 84, when John won, I was so grateful to get the opportunity to win out to ride him again, because I thought I cost him the race the year before not knowing him. When I rode him in 83, I should have gotten through on the fence, but the following year we were able to go ahead and make it up.
And he was Horse of the Year that year, and the only guy to win it twice, and Chris has a chance now with Sandpit. You told me that you have never, ever been on Sandpit, even to breeze him in the morning.
No, I've just chased him around the track a lot. I haven't really gotten a chance to breeze him or anything. I was supposed to work him about 10 days ago, but I got kicked just a couple days before that, right above the knee. Helmsman kicked me, and I didn't make the workout that morning. But I had never been on Deputy Commander before yesterday either, or it happens a lot, so it's not that unusual.
All right, speaking of Deputy Commander, those of you who watch the Travers here on ESPN were treated to a terrific horse race in a very emotional moment for this man, Chris McCarron. Tell us about this race and what this meant to you.
Well, I'm glad I'm getting to see it. I haven't seen the replay yet. This is terrific. What an awesome race he ran. He ran so gamely. He broke just a little bit slowly, but then he put himself in the race right away. He got a good position laying third. Most of the winners were winning from a stalking position. And he had to call on all his effort, all his talent to hold off Barons yesterday. And what a great piece of heart he showed.
And for those of you who did not see that race, the news that Chris McCarron lost his mother earlier in the week, you were emotional, to say the least, after that race. Tell us, reflect, now we're 24 hours later, about that day for you, Chris, and what it meant to you.
Well, obviously, I'm a little bit more comfortable about the whole situation, but, you know, we all loved my mom dearly, and she passed away Tuesday night, and I thought about it long and hard whether I should be riding or not, and I thought, well, I think that she would frown upon the situation if I didn't ride, so I could actually, I've heard people say this before, and I never experienced it myself, but I could feel her presence, and it was a great feeling.
Have a great ride today in the Million.
Thanks, Bob.
Chris McCarron, who'll ride Sandpit.
1995, he had run in France, and first out in the United States, won the Hollywood Derby at 15-1. It's a fascinating story because there aren't many starts between then and today. And to fill in the blanks, Bob Newmeyer talked earlier with Neil Drysdale, the trainer.
We're here with Neil Drysdale, the trainer of Labib, one of the upset possibilities here in the Million. And a while back, Neil, a lot of folks would not consider Labib an outsider, but the problems that you've had with this fine horse put him kind of on the outside. Tell us about this horse and what you expect from him, if you even know, in today's Arlington Million.
Well, obviously since the Manhattan, we've been working with him. He threw Velasquez. What he did is he ducked. John hit him on the right. Hit him on the right. He hit him on the right, and the horse ducked into the stick. And John was expecting him to go left, so he lost his balance. After the race, he just said, "Well, I lost my balance. I was expecting him to go left, and he went right." At the time, he was traveling very well, and he looked like he was going to win the race. After that race, we felt that we should stop and start all over again with him and sweeten him up and just make him really happy. But in doing that, he lost his condition. He lost his fitness. And so when we ran him in the Eddie Reed, he was a very short horse, and he got very tired. But since then, he's worked well, and we're very pleased with the way he's working, and he's very happy. So we'll just see if this will translate into a good race today.
Right, we both agree this is an open race. You are an outsider. Do you think Labib on his best day can beat this crop we have here today in the Arlington Million?
I think Labib is a very talented horse. He's one of the more talented horses I've had. It's just a question of what's going on in his head.
Will the real Labib please stand up?
There are so many talented horses in this field, and that's just one of them, the Brazilian-bred Sandpit, who has amassed $3.5 million and looks to win $1 million race in just a few minutes. Race number 17 in this series. Labib is up to 13-1. Up Smile is at 7. Awad is at 3.5-1. Sandpit 9-2. Marlin is 3-1. Allied Forces is at 7. We've had one scratch. That was Chief Bearheart. Percutant, the long shot, at 35-1, and Jerry at 5-2. Well, you know, Sandpit was the 3-year-old champion in Brazil, and Bob Newmeyer needed to do some research on this horse. So how did he prepare to tell us about Sandpit? Bob went to the movies.
That's right, Dave. I was watching one of my favorite films of all time, Casablanca, the other night with Humphrey Bogart, and in that epic, Claude Rains uttered that familiar line, "Round up the usual suspects." Well, here at the Arlington Million, the usual suspects are Awad and Sandpit. They've run twice. This is their 3rd run here in the Million, and Awad has beaten them both times. And this year, trainer Richard Mandella hopes that Sandpit will turn things around, and it will be different. At 8 years old, Sandpit is a racing relic, and trainer Richard Mandella treats him like a family heirloom, the most valuable of antiques.
Oh, yeah, if you couldn't get attached to Sandpit, you wouldn't like horses at all. If you like horses, you've got to love him, because he's just a special package. He's beautiful, he's smart, he's very personal, spoiled. He's like part of the family here.
Mandella hopes the 3rd time is the charm for his salty veteran. Twice he's been favored here in the Arlington Million, and both times fickle Miss Lady Luck turned her back on him.
The problems he's had is racing luck. You know, he got pinned in on the inside and didn't get to make his best move in the first Arlington Million that Awad won. And then last year he got in a little bit of an argument with the starter here, which he's done before. It wasn't the starter's fault. He's a little hard-headed about that sometimes.
Another old-timer, the 7-year-old Awad, has been Sandpit's primary nemesis, particularly here at the Million. But while Sandpit and Awad are similar in age, in class, and in overall brilliance, they are very different in racing style.
Sandpit's very versatile, that he could be on the lead, he can take back, can be in the middle. He's pretty handy at being in a good position. Awad's always a tough fighter, and he likes this track. He beat us here 2 years ago, and he come back and won the race in New York this year, so I'm sure he's going to be tough to beat.
While most 8-year-olds still in training are knocking around and claiming races from coast to coast, Sandpit continues at the very top of his profession, a testament to his heart, his will, and his love of the game.
He's a uniquely healthy, sound horse. I don't know that I would get a lot of the credit for staying around sound. I think he was just a very special athlete that was born with good bone structure and good quality of bone and a good a good circulatory system that keeps him healthy year in, year out, and I'm just grateful to have him.
An analogy, he's Satchel Paige pitching baseballs. He's George Blanda kicking field goals. He's 8 years old, and he's a wonder. He is a quirky type. But Mandela says he's been working with the assistant starters and the guys at the gate, and he's very confident that Sandpit will have an uneventful entry into that starting gate, and it'll be smooth sailing from there. Dave?
Well, of course, Sandpit is Brazilian bred, but when we think about international, we think about, well, the horses from across the pond. And the Europeans who have come to Arlington and won the Million, as you see, there are 4 of them. Ptolemaio and Teleprompter, Mill Native, and Dear Doctor. One horse that we should give a little attention to today is Allied Forces. I know some of you follow racing just around the Triple Crown. Remember Allied Forces from last year's Preakness? Well, he broke from the 1 hole, I believe, but just didn't get track. He didn't like the dirt. He returned to the grass, won the Lamplighter at Monmouth, and then was a stirring victor in the Pegasus at the Meadowlands. A really great effort on the grass. Then he went over to and won a big race at Royal Ascot. Now, do you have anybody else in the field who might be coming over for a victory?
Well, some of these horses kind of travel back and forth like Allied Forces. Percutant is a horse who raced in Europe. In fact, he was a Grade 1 winner in Europe. Now he's based in California. He's under the care of Jean-Pierre Dupuis in California. He's won 2 out of 3 starts out there. Dupuis was preparing him to come to the Million, was going to give him a race on the dirt in the Pacific Classic. And, well, he lost his rider in the post parade. It's a little difficult to describe what happened. He got a little romantic about the pony and leapt aboard, and the rider fell off. So he didn't get that race into him. So Dupuis is bringing him up here to Works on Works alone, and hopefully he'll have him where he wants him. And earlier we asked Jean-Pierre Dupuis what he would have to do to get a good performance out of Percutant this afternoon.
We need a perfect trip, of course, because there are some very good horses in the race, you know, Marlin and Sandpit and Awad, who is very consistent. You know. You cannot win those kind of races with a bad trip. You need a perfect trip. I have a very good jockey from Ireland, Michael Kenine. He won the Beverly D last year. And that's it. You know, I think it's good enough to win it, but we need a lot of all the luck we can get.
And there's Awad. Dave Donk putting the tack on Awad. He will be looking to win his 2nd Arlington Million.
That's trainer David Donk. Come on back. We'll see if we can make Charles C. blush again in the next segment.
Jerry Bailey, you're at 5-2, and you're the favorite, and that amazes me. I think it's respect for just how hot you are these days.
Well, possibly. He's got a chance. I didn't expect him to be a favorite, but he's in there swinging.
You've been off him for a few runs. Antley was on him for a couple of times, including a 2nd-place finish to Influent. He really had a tough time that day. Influent had a nice soft pace and a difficult run for Jerry at Atlantic City.
It was no pace. He needs a little pace, but I expect him to run well.
Jerry, for Bill Mott and Alan Paulson, the famous cigar colors, tell me about the strategy you're going to use this afternoon.
Probably be a stalking position unless something strange happens in the gate. 3rd or 4th I'd be happy with early.
Jerry's got to wrap it up because he's got to get a leg up for Jerry here in the Arlington Million. Good luck. All right, Dave, back to you.
Well, I really like Jerry this afternoon, too. I think that he's one of the horses that has a chance to really explode. Most of the other horses in here, we've seen their best, but I don't think we've seen the best of Jerry on the racetrack yet. It's sort of a reverse Cigar kind of a thing, because he is just moving onto the turf, whereas when Cigar was racing from that same great combination of Bill Mott and Jerry Bailey and Alan Paulson, well, that horse moved from the turf to the dirt and became that great champion. Let's check the odds. Labib at 13, Op Smile 7, Awad is at 3, Sandpit 4.5, Marlin is at 3, Allied Forces is at 7, scratch the 7, Chief Bearheart, 30-1 Percutant, and Jerry, surprisingly, is the 5-2 favorite. And there's a very interesting proposition or head-to-head bet this afternoon. You could bet either Jerry Bailey or Lanfranco Dettori in the 3 Grade 1 events. Right now, Jerry Bailey is leading 1-0. Bob?
With Bill Mott, who trains Jerry, the horse that Jerry Bailey will ride, I look at him kind of as a mystery horse in this field, Bill. I'm to be honest with you, I'm a little surprised he's the favorite. Are you?
Well, not entirely. I tell you, he was a good horse last year. He won 6 in a row on the dirt and a Grade 1 at Oaklawn, and he was second in the Hollywood handicap, and he's been a good horse all along. He lost his form a little bit, and we put him on the grass, and it seems like it's picked him up, and he's found some new life.
Yeah, Dave Johnson made the point, almost a cigar in reverse. A cigar, the turf to the dirt, the rest is history, Jerry. But he is still wrestling with where you want to go with this horse. And is today a key race as to where you'll go down the road?
Well, I think this is a big dance for this horse today. This is an important race for him. It's $1 million purse, and it carries a lot of prestige. And, I mean, we've been pointing for this for some time, so chances are we'll probably leave him on the grass, but this will tell us something.
All right, Bill Maude, the conditioner of Jerry in today's Arlington Million. Dave?
Thanks very much, Bob. Well, they're moving out onto the track. Joe Kelly has called them with his distinctive horn. And let's take a look now at the field. We start with number 1, Labib, the British-bred 5-year-old who was sired by Learfan, who had one of the worst trips in the history of the Breeders' Cup. So maybe Labib will make amends this afternoon somewhat. And Corey Black is aboard. This horse has only been to the track 7 times since he came from France. As we said, he might be a little bit of a nutcase, but he's fast. And number 2 is next, Op Smile.
The gray colt, like Awad, he is a Maryland bred. He's by the same stallion, Caveat. He was foaled at the same farm, Rye Hill Farm. It has that same ferocious late finishing style. He's a Grade 1 stakes winner this year. Defending champ Robbie Davis fits him like a glove.
Winner of the 95 million, second to Mecke last year. Awad without a stable, without a pony going to the post, and Pat Day in the irons. The only horse ever to win the Secretariat and the Million, Awad.
Well, another returning familiar face is the 8-year-old Sandpit. He was the beaten favorite in the last 2 millions, but this good-looking horse has been freshened up by his trainer, Dick Mandela. He's pointed him specifically for this race, brings him here off a series of works. He said he wanted him fresh this time, and Chris McCarron picks up the mount.
Well, we saw the Bailey, Mott, and Paulson connection earlier. Here's a great combination. Michael Tabor, the owner, Wayne Lucas, the trainer, Gary Stevens, the jockey. Here's the horse with early speed, Marlin, who's by Del Mar Handicap winner Sword Dance. He was a wire-to-wire winner of the Secretariat last year.
And here's Allied Forces. This is an American-bred colt who's bounced back and forth between here and Europe, pulling off a rare Meadowlands Royal Ascot double. You don't see that often, winning the Pegasus and the Queen Anne Stakes. But this 1.25 mile distance may be just a little bit beyond his best range. Frankie Dettori has the mount.
Number 8, Percutant, just unseated the rider, and there you can see Mick Kinane is being helped back on. Sometimes these horses who got their early schooling in Europe just don't like what we're doing here.
Well, it's the lead ponies again. He evidently, he's kind of taking a little interest in that one there. His perverse behavior is going to cost him this race as well as the Pacific Classic.
And Charles C. is blushing again. Number 9 is Jerry, the 5-year-old by Theatrical. Right there, you look at the line and you say turf, and yet you see that he won the Oaklawn Handicap on the dirt, and you see Jerry Bailey, who won the Beverly D just a little while ago and is having such a great season, and you say this horse has to be in the mix, and sure enough, the folks have responded, and he's right there as one of the favorites. So a great renewal of the Arlington Million. Who do you like? Any horse in there has a chance. We'll be back after this. And see what's happening at the mutual windows. Labib is at generous 13-1. Op Smile is at 8. Awad, who won this race 2 years ago, 3.5 to 1. Sandpit, who's been favored in the last 2 runnings but didn't get to the winner's circle, is now 4. Will he get there today? The favorite right now, Gary Stevens on Marlin, trained by D. Wayne Lucas and wearing the orange and blue Michael Tabor colors. Allied Forces at 8, Percutant 30, and Jerry at 3 to 1. What about the pace? Marlin on the front end like he won in the Hollywood race, the Sunset. It looks like he will go to the front, and he has a nice post position to get there. Charles C., what about a horse who needs that early pace up front?
Well, a horse like Op Smile certainly needs a little boost in the pace department. And Jerry, breaking from the outside post, he didn't have a lot of choice but to maybe go for it, so he might help push things along. But Op Smile was compromised in his last start at the Caesars International because there really wasn't much pace to run at. He can get away with that when it's not a really, really tough field, but when a really classy field of international horses, he needs a little something more honest to run at. And if you're wondering about his name, that's a little unusual bit of a name. It's named for an international organization that donates money to children needing plastic surgery for facial deformities, and a portion of his winnings go to that fund. Operation Smile.
Allied Forces won at 10-1 at the Meadowlands and at 9-1 in Europe in a race against some of the best turf horses over across the seas. Bob, what about Allied Forces in here at 8-1?
Well, I know a lot of our European fans are licking their chops over that price on Allied Forces. Dave, class is not the issue with this horse. It's his ability to get 1.25 miles. He's placed in grade 1s in Europe. He's ridden by Frankie Dettori, but can he get the 1.25 miles? That is the big question mark about Allied Forces. He tried it in the Eclipse Stakes against the likes of Pisulski and Benny the Dip and Bosrasham. These are the heavy heads in Europe. He finished a respectable 4th, beaten about 5 in that effort. As we take a look at Sandpit, and we'll be watching him very closely as he gets to the gate. Allied Forces at 8-1 could be a factor. Can he get the 1.25 miles? Dave?
Sandpit acting up a bit. And Charlesy, while we have a second, what about post positions in here?
Well, we've loaded Sandpit first here. Remember his unruly behavior in the gate last year. They wanted him in and to be sure about things. Interesting, Labib draws the #1 post position. He's the one we have to watch now with the erratic behavior during the running of a race. Neil Drysdale feels that he needed that last race and that he'll run a much improved race today. Corey Black has got to be careful to leave the stick alone with Labib. And there's Awad, the old man, back again. Pat Day aboard. Pat suits his running style very well.
He always seems to get good. Awad does at this time of the year at this track. And with the call of the Arlington Million, here's Michael Rona.
Many thanks, Dave. About half the field in. Sandpit moved in first without a problem this year. Percutant has come along. And the last two, Awad and Jerry, will break from the outside.
Still out.
They've moved in good order. Racing in the Arlington Million. Allied Forces veered outwards, leaving the gate. And Marlin gets plenty of room to be mobilized early by Gary Stevens. Marlin is a clear and easy leader coming down the lane the first time. Allied Forces getting balanced and striding to second, and he's tugging against Dettori. Allied Forces keen to go faster. Sandpit third on the rail, followed closely by Jerry. A length and a quarter Labib, who's in tight 5th on the fence. Then Percutant, as Gary Stevens throws out the anchor on Marlin. He's stacking them up behind him going into the first turn. Awad and Upsmile, the last pair, some 8 lengths from the leader. It's Marlin about a length in front. Allied Forces running second. Sandpit third. Jerry 4th and 3 wide. Labib gets off the rail and travels up a close 5th between horses at the 3/4 of a mile pole. 2 lengths to Percutant, 3 to Awad, and 1 to Upsmile. It's Marlin leading, employing similar tactics that brought him such resounding success this time last year in the Secretariat Stakes. Marlin from Jerry taking closer order. He's now prompting the leader just a neck astern. It's a length and a quarter to Sandpit. Allied Forces is yielding ground. Labib is now 3 wide and picking up ground, running a forward race. They're followed by Percutant. Awad gives the leader 6.5 length Upsmile on his outside. It's Marlin just in front from Jerry. Sandpit a length and a half away third from Labib. Allied Forces the centre. 2.5 to Percutant. Awad and Upsmile is 2 lengths last. Past the quarter pole in the Million. Marlin is just in front. Jerry looming up now. Marlin from Jerry at the top of the stretch. Sandpit is into the clear. Allied Forces still there, followed by Percutant. Awad is well back at the 8th pole, where Marlin kicks away by more than 2. Jerry can do no better. Sandpit gets to second, then Awad late on the scene with Percutant. But Marlin leads throughout to win the Million. Marlin from Sandpit and Percutant. Then Awad, followed by Jerry, Allied Forces, Labib, and Upsmile.
The speed of the pack is determined by the leader. You have just seen a brilliant race riding exhibition by one of the greatest that we've ever produced in this country, Gary Stevens. To the quarter in 24 and 3, slowing it down, as Michael said, stacking them up on the first turn, the half in 49 and 4, and they could not get him because he had more. It allowed him to do this, Charlesy.
It was a European-style race. The difference was, at the end, it was the Americans who were running. Gary Stevens did a beautiful job of backing it up. And Jerry Bailey came to him on Jerry. The two picked the pace up. They ran hard for home, but Marlin was the only one with anything left. Sandpit, the 8-year-old, makes a great run at the finish, but it was all Marlin. He had saved too much in the beginning.
13th in last year's Breeders' Cup Turf. I'll bet he'll be back for more. And Gary Stevens won the Breeders' Cup Mile last year with DeHaas. He'll be back for more, because we're all looking forward to the Breeders' Cup, and we'll be back at Arlington International with the leaders next on ESPN. There's Gary Stevens in front all the way, getting congratulations from so many of his fans. Racing Secretary Frank Gabriel right behind him. And maybe this race was determined at the start. Bob Newmeyer, let's watch.
Marlin figured to be on the lead, but watch number 6, Allied Forces, duck out on the break, take a right-hand turn, and take the numbers 8 and 9 horses, Percuton and Jerry with him. That allowed Marlin to his inside to waltz, and I mean just stroll to the lead. And when he went the half in 49 and 4, Marlin was a winner. And in my judgment, he went the last quarter in 23 and 4. Just too much class with this kind of dawdling lead. And with me, the architect of this ride, one of the best in the business, as Dave pointed out, Gary Stevens. 49 and 4. School was out for the opposition, no?
Yeah, the race was basically over. First time under the grandstand, the first time. Got the first quarter the way we wanted it, the second quarter the way we wanted it, and it was over with early.
Gary, how is riding a horse like Marlin different from other horses you've ridden where you're dependent on pace to set up your own one run?
Well, when you're riding a horse like Marlin, they're so versatile, but they've got that good tactical speed, and they're classy individuals. And you take the race to the opposition. You don't wait for the opposition to see what they're going to do. I took the race to them early. That's what Wayne told me to do. He said, if you're able to slow them down, he said, give them no chance in the final turn. He said, open up coming off of that turn and just put them away, and that's exactly what happened.
Did you peek back at any time? I know Sandpit was looming. Awad, who's so dependent on pace, was way back. He made a courageous run. Percutant did his job, but were you looking for anybody down the lane, or were you just, just guiding your horse down the lane?
No, my dad taught me when I was a little kid, never look back. They're back there trying to catch you. I knew that there was 8 of them back there that were trying to catch you, so no, I wasn't looking back.
All right, Gary Stevens on the winner here at the Million. Dave?
He joined some great company and horses who have won the Arlington Million, and now it's just Awad and Marlin who have won both the Secretariat and the Arlington Million. Marlin pays $7.80, $4 and $3.40. Sandpit $4.60, $3.60. Percutant $8 to show. The exacta 5-4 combo here, $33.40, $2.02 and 2 the time. Charlesy, who you got?
Okay. With me now is Michael Tabor, the owner of Marlin. And Michael, we've seen your name an enormous amount, but Marlin we'll see a lot more of. What will be your next stop?
Well, I guess he'll have one race. I'm not sure which race before the Breeders in November.
The Breeders' Cup Turf.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Indeed, you'll have to hold a strong hand out there. You have a number of other horses Breeders' Cup bound, I'm sure.
Well, we hope to. I mean, Wayne's talking of a couple of the 2-year-olds that will be running, and we have a horse maybe from Europe that will go in the Breeders as well. Desert King that came second in the judgment, so hopefully we'll have a strong field, but it's a long time till November.
Well, you got the job done today. Many congratulations, and go and receive your trophy.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Back to Dave.
A big round of applause as Gary Stevens gets back up, tips his cap, gets ready for some more winner's circle photographs. Wayne Lucas is waiting right out there for his steed to come back. Congratulations also to a fine trainer, a great racehorse, and to those who picked Marlin this afternoon. Next up for us in racing to the Breeders' Cup, it'll be the first stop for us at Turfway Park. And for all the action of Kentucky Cup Day, join us on September the 13th at 5 o'clock Eastern as we continue racing to the Breeders' Cup. You know, back in 79 AD, on August the 24th, Mount Vesuvius erupted and covered Pompeii with fumes and lava and smoke. Well, this afternoon on August 24th, 1997, Marlin exploded out of the gate. And if you didn't have a ticket on him, you just tore it up and threw it in the air. It was a great race. Here's the full order. Marlin, Sandpit, Percutant, Awad, Jerry, Allied Forces, Labib, and Op Smile. A great edition of the Arlington Million. This has been a presentation of ESPN, the worldwide leader in sports.
The bid has made the lead, and now Awad explodes onto the seed. Awad is drawing away. Awad is going to win the Arlington Million.
But for Awad's connections, this scene would not be repeated in New York come October. On Belmont's soggy turf course, Awad never got on track, while Chris McCarron guided Northern Spur to a hard-fought victory in the mile-and-a-half turf. And here's the only successful Arlington Million Breeders' Cup double. In 1989, trainer Wayne Lucas shortened Steinlen up to a mile and produced this stirring victory.
Steinlen's in tight. He's looking for racing room toward the inside. Spohn is coming hard. Zilzal unleashing up furious one on the outside. Steinlen, a daring move on the hedge, gets the lead. Sabona, one last lunge. Steinlen gets it in the final strides.
It should also be noted that finishing second in the Million bodes well for Breeders' Cup starters. 3 times a runner-up at Arlington has also been second in racing's biggest day. The most recent example is Sky Classic, who took a tough beat in both races, but was still named champion male turf horse for 1992. You know, I'm trying to think of my favorite Arlington Million, and so many jump out. But I know that Michael Rona, who's the track announcer here, has some ideas. And it has to start with 1981, which was the very first Arlington Million. And how could you forget it? With John Henry and the Bart. Down to the wire. Was it John Henry? Was it the Bart? The Bart on the inside. John Henry on the outside. John Henry gets there by a nostril. The tightest of photo finishes. Not like the dead heat we saw earlier. John Henry really won that. Now let's get Michael Rona's opinion of that.
Well, in its relatively short history,
only other horse other than John Henry to win the Arlington Million twice.
Well, we know he's got a real affinity for Arlington Park. He won the Secretariat here as a 3-year-old. He came back 2 years later as a 5-year-old. He got a hot early pace, which really set it up for his come-from-behind style. And he came storming under Eddie Maple to set a track record which still stands today.
Now, another horse who really likes the grass surface here at Arlington is a horse by the name of Marlin. And watch him in action just 2 outs ago in the Sunset Handicap at Hollywood Park, just breezing along. He's a horse with a lot of early speed, and Gary Stevens was aboard that day, as he is going to be today.
Well, he could help set it up for another late closer. That's Op Smile, the gray horse, storming from last again, and he will be running the same sort of race today. This is the Manhattan, and he will be doing the same style under Robbie Davis, who won this race last year with Mecke.
Now, the major players, of course, you've seen some of them out there on the turf course, but there's a lot of major conditioners in the barn area here.
The trainers of these Arlington
International. We're live on ESPN about 25 miles outside the Chicago city limits, where the weather today has just gotten better and better as the minutes have ticked away. The temperature is 76 degrees. It's sunny, a slight wind out of the northwest, but the turf is still yielding from the overnight rains. Hi, everybody. I'm Dave Johnson, and welcome to the biggest day in Illinois. The centerpiece of the festival is the big one, the Arlington Million. Let's check the conditions. The Arlington Million has a $1 million purse. This is number 17, and it's a Grade 1 event, 1.25 miles on the grass for 3-year-olds and up. And joining me now is Charles C. Canty. And Charles, just like the weather today, in its 17th running, it just keeps getting better and better.
It's a good one. The horses in this field collectively have earned over $12 million. I think we got more millionaires here than we do upstairs in the Turf Club. They've come from all over the country, from Canada, and we've even got 2 European invaders.
But the big question, at least locally, is whether Awad can be the...
Arlington Million starters have accounted for 20 Breeders' Cup races. And we might point out that Sandpit is the only horse not nominated to the Breeders' Cup in this
Arlington
field.
Million starters have won 5 Breeders' Cup grass events in the same season. But if you compare the list of names, they're almost totally different. In fact, many of them actually have had a total role reversal between Arlington Million Day and Breeders' Cup Day. A typical example of that reversal occurred in 1988 as Mill Native produced the biggest upset in Million history, returning $83.20. Behind him, Sunshine Forever in third. Great Communicator could do no better than eighth. 2 months later, it was Great Communicator's turn for the upset at 12-1 in the Breeders' Cup Turf. Sunshine Forever second, while Mill Native opted for the mile and finished ninth. And 2 years ago, stretch running Awad won the Million, while Northern Spur finished far back in 10th.